Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about Happiness for Beginners. Happiness for Beginners is an American romantic comedy based on the novel of the same name, and tells the story of Helen, a freshly divorced English teacher who decides to make a change in her life and signs up for a group hiking trip away from the city. When she gets there, she's surprised to meet her brother's friend Jake on the same trip. The two have a long-standing beef with each other, but are forced to get along as they must cooperate on the trip together. As they spend more time with each other, they start to relax and help each other more with activities on the trip, which leads to an inevitable romance. This is yet another one of many mediocre rom-coms that wouldn't be out of place on the Hallmark Channel, Lifetime, or any similar network. The romance didn't really work for me, but the comedy ended up being way funnier than I expected, so in a way, the two genres kind of balance each other out. Helen, who's played by Ellie Kemper, is the same typical divorcee looking for a fresh start that's appeared in many other movies like this one. There are elements to her character that make her stand out more, but not always in the best way. She has this snarky attitude toward the male lead and even other characters on the trip that makes it hard to get attached to her as a character. It's nice that there's an emotional side revealed later on as far as her family backstory goes, but it's not prominent enough to ever be relevant to what happens in the story. Jake, who's played by Luke Grimes, is just as uninteresting as Helen is. He's a former doctor in training who dropped out and has since gone on a journey of self-discovery. It's nice that the movie uses his background to help the group in specific situations, but there's not much else to him other than this. The reason why he drops out of med school is explained later on, but again, like with Helen, it happens at too late a point to bother getting invested in it. It's not that I don't sympathize with him, or Helen for that matter, it's just that their arcs barely exist till the final act, and it all feels rushed when it gets to that point. The romance just didn't work like it was supposed to. There's nothing wrong with having two characters hate each other and then gradually fall in love over time, as it happens a lot in other rom-coms, but in this movie's case, these two are mad at each other for way too long. It's okay at first, as the two genuinely seem to despise each other, but it gets more annoying the longer it goes on. The reasoning behind their animosity, like with everything else I mentioned, takes way too long to get into, and for most of the movie, all the audience has to go on is that Helen finds Jake annoying, without explaining why. Their frenemy dynamic feels too one-sided to make them believable as lovers. Even when they finally start warming up to each other, the romance is disappointing, because there's not enough screen time to appreciate what they finally have. Funnily enough, the supporting characters are much better in comparison to the main ones and ultimately save the movie for me. While they have their own issues at times, they inject a lot more personality into the story that help ward off the ongoing negativity between Helen and Jake. It's great that the movie includes all these characters together and not just focusing on the two leads the whole time. They all band together and help each other just like one would expect from a hiking trip, and their camaraderie inspires a positive tone that fits well with the genre. Now that being said, there's still a mixed bag in terms of characterization. They all have their own individual gimmicks that vary between being funny, cringeworthy, or just plain boring. I wasn't a fan of Mason's macho attitude or how ditzy Kaylee was, and their gags just didn't land with me. Conversely, the hiking instructor Beckett was so much fun with how seriously he takes himself and the trip. He never once drops his act the entire time, even when everyone else is joking around, which adds more to the humor. And there's another character named Hugh who I loved. Although he's stereotypically gay and his hang-up about his age is a little odd, he has so many funny lines that I didn't mind it. This movie is a weird case of the comedy being pulled off better than the romance. It's still on the tamer side of things, but I was pleasantly surprised by how funny some of the dialogue was between the characters, as well as the various activities they get involved with while hiking. One of the funniest moments in the movie for me is when Beckett is instructing the group how to tie a rope called a bear hang. He asks everyone if they know what it is, to which Hugh responds by saying it's a party at his place on Friday nights. That alone is funny by itself, but then Beckett follows up trying to toss his rope onto a tree, and he just keeps failing and doing it wrong over and over and over again, and it's so hilarious. I almost forgot this movie was supposed to be a romance at times, which is a shame because it clearly tries to pull off a romantic vibe with its setting. The lakes and trees of the Appalachian Trail that everyone hikes on is a feast for the eyes and lends well to the story, even if it does get repetitive after a while. It just has a nice relaxing tone that makes the movie more enjoyable. The different tracking shots of the forest and the background music all feel romantic, and it's nice, but also frustrating, because it doesn't gel with what happens with the two leads. Pretty much everything about the story is predictable and cliche. Even if the movie focused less on the chemistry between Helen and Jake, or lack thereof, it still proceeds in the same formula as always, just with less antagonism toward the end instead. Some scenes in the movie dragged on for a while too. There were a few moments of dialogue between Helen and Jake that could have stood to be a bit shorter. I know the movie is based on a book and it's trying to be comprehensive, but the movie would have fared better if its details were spread out more and paced better instead of cramming a ton of exposition into a few scenes. At the end of the day though, the movie puts just enough effort in to be an acceptable rom-com. The romance is hard to take seriously, but then again, it's not the kind of movie that's meant to be taken seriously anyway, and its basic message about self-discovery through losing yourself does come across well enough, if only because of the other characters' help. Overall, Happiness for Beginners is another average rom-com story that's in line with many other movies like it. If you enjoy romantic comedies and just want to lose yourself in an easygoing experience, you might enjoy checking this out. The subpar romance combines with entertaining comedy to create yet another mediocre love story about finding oneself. Though there is some merit to this approach, it's pretty much a beginner-level rom-com with how safe it plays its story, and for some people, that's all they need to be happy. What did you think about this movie? Did you find it funnier than you initially thought, or were you also disappointed by the romance? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways guys, that's going to wrap up my review of Happiness for Beginners. Thanks for watching this video, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Thai crime comedy, The Murderer. Bye bye!